Tate Chronicles now transmitting.
Welcome to the Tate Chronicles on Healthcare Now Radio. And now, here's your host, Jim Tate.
Good day, citizens of the free world, from border to border, coast to coast, and to all the ships at sea. I bring you a warm welcome. This is your correspondent, Jim Tate, and thank you for tuning into the Tate Chronicles. Join me as we cut through the fog that exists at the leading edge of healthcare technology. My guest today is Damon Auer. Damon is the Managing Director for North America for Dedalus. Dedalus provides services and products to support a digitally enabled healthcare ecosystem. Their vision, and it's a big one, is promoting change in healthcare delivery from the episodic-centric approach to the continuum of care. Damon, welcome to the Tate Chronicles.
Thanks, Jim. Happy to be here.
You know, I read an article under your byline not too long ago. Actually, it was yesterday. It was in Med City News, Damon, on TEFCA. That's for those who don't know much about TEFCA yet. We're all certainly learning about it. It's the Trusted Exchange Framework and Common Agreement. This is the, I guess, most recent version in a widespread attempt, a powerful attempt to bring interoperability to healthcare data in the U.S. So obviously you've been researching TEFCA. What are your initial thoughts on it? Does it have a good shot?
I hope so. I'm a bit of an optimist, Jim. So I tend to view these things through what could be enabled by a change like TEFCA represents to the market. And unfortunately, TEFCA comes with several dozen new acronyms that we all have to learn. In fact, the very first one, right, with 5 letters in it, is that in and of itself is going to cause a lot of people to not go any deeper than the headline, right? But of course, we need to go deeper than the headline to actually take advantage of what's represented there. And I think for myself and our teams at Dedalus, particularly here in the U.S., where TEFCA is a regulatory relevant topic, but will be a relevant topic for lots of other geographies too as we go forward, but will most directly impact us here in the U.S. initially. I'd like to think that that it represents the beginning of the end of impersonal care experiences for all of us humans who consume care, and arguably healthcare is the most expensive and most intimate and personal service that we'll ever consume in our lifetime. And the fact that it has managed, despite a lot of other efforts, to remain so wildly impersonal is disappointing, but it's also a challenge and a mission for Dedalus and others who are really trying to make an impact, I think, on the healthcare transformation in the U.S. to make it a consumer, a really consumer-centered, not just, in an advertisement, but a really consumer-centered experience that aims to know the person and show the person that we know them every time we experience or have a need for care.
I couldn't agree with you more on that, Damon. And so TEFCA, for those who are kind of new to the concept or not up on TEFCA, it is certainly something that just hasn't jumped out of the box in the last 6 months. It's the planning for TEFCA and the research behind it, and bringing players together to come up with things is over 4 years old. And it really outlines that common set of principles, terms, and conditions to really put a universal floor of agreement for health data interoperability across the country. Now, and one thing that struck me in the title of your article, Health Interoperability with Purpose, TEFCA's Impact, and maybe the beginning of the end of impersonal care. it would be good if it works. We want it to work. There's some things that are certainly working against it somewhat. One thing is it's voluntary. It's a question of can enough consensus be brought together to get that critical mass where people want to be involved with it, providers want to be involved with it, that it brings enough value to providers as well as patients. So there's a lot of aspects of it, and I just kind of wonder, in terms of the work that Dedalus does, Damon. Can you kind of tell me some of the partners and who do you work with? How do you support them? What type of products and services? How you might in some way be interacting with the TEFCA model as it moves forward?
Yeah, happy to take that one. Dedalus is one of the biggest healthcare software companies in the world that a lot of folks, a lot of healthcare executives and other industry stakeholders here in the U.S. has never heard of. And that's because we're new to the U.S. market as of the last almost 12 months. We launched Dedalus in North America in April of last year, 2021. So coming up rapidly on the first year anniversary there. And really what Dedalus does globally is enable healthcare organizations to deliver care in a meaningful and personalized way at scale. So we run all the clinical systems. We're an electronic medical records vendor outside of North America, and I'll elaborate on that here in a moment. Mm-hmm. Outside of North America, though, we're the biggest electronic medical record outside of the U.S. with over 6,400 hospitals, I think, at last count, 5,500 labs and diagnostic sites that we enable all of the digital interaction for clinicians and consumers of care. And what we're really looking to do here in North America is take the best out of that really broad and very modern systems portfolio for transforming healthcare and pick the products that we think can actually have the most impact in the North American market and help us and our customers personalize care experiences at scale. So we are selecting products very carefully from that portfolio. There's a lot of shiny object obsession in the healthcare industry in the U.S. in particular, because there's a lot of innovation, a lot of investment going on, very rapid cycle innovation, and we run the risk of sort of getting enamored by the latest, coolest, shiniest thing. And we actually aim to bring shiny things to the U.S. market, but do it in a very sustainable way. Dedalus is big enough and ambitious enough in our participation in the healthcare industry globally and now in the U.S. that we're a partner that our customers can innovate with for years to come, but with a very modern software portfolio. We've got over 3,000 team members in the Eurozone that are developing and enhancing our software every single day. So there's really good, cool stuff coming out of that. So the things that we've identified initially out of that portfolio to make a difference, and this is very relevant to the TEFCA topic, is our interoperability platform that we refer to simply as Dedalus Connected Care, and the ecosystem around that platform that allows our customers around the world to develop high-value digital therapeutics along with the just management of the electronic chart and the medical information for a person. So that interoperability platform is a hyper-open platform built from the beginning, componentized and on open standards. And that is our flagship offering for the North American market.
And let me ask you, that phrase hyper open. I've heard hyper open, hyper openness. Could you elaborate on that? What do you mean by hyper open?
Yeah, if you think about it, there's still way too many participants in the industry here in the U.S., Jim, including technology vendors that run intentionally closed ecosystems, and that is not okay. In fact, it strikes me as entirely antithetical to the idea of enabling personalized care everywhere for as many people as we can all the time. And so the reason that we emphasize that hyper open, it's both a technical engineering philosophy into all the software products that Dedalus creates and enhances over time, but it's also just a commercial stance in the market. I continue to run into too many vendors that are literally intentionally running closed systems. And I can't imagine that we as consumers of care and the industry itself are going to abide that position much longer. And TEFCA, I think, chips away at that in a really meaningful way. And it's interesting to see the framework introduced by TEFCA, and the ONC, since it was created, has had a way of introducing frameworks and concepts that later become requirements, right, for the industry.
Right. Sure.
And my expectation and my hope, quite frankly, in the context and spirit of personalized care experiences, is that that's exactly how TEFCA plays out. It's voluntary and optional right now, but the gravity of consumer demand, I believe, and I hope, and I will spend my days trying to make come true, the fact that we need to make our healthcare information hyper open to the extent that I can move it around the way that I want to benefit me, right? And we've done that with other industries, lots of other industries, and I'm thrilled to see it happening with healthcare.
Do you think banking is an analogy of hyper openness? Would you?
Totally. So I think back, and I've been thinking about this a fair bit in the last 2 months since TEFCA headlines really started to land, is that when I started banking 30 years ago, I had to go to a branch. I had to wait for a teller just to do something as simple as deposit a check or check my account balance. I mean, these things that today we completely take for granted because of the advancements in financial services. Banking became financial services, and I think it's an interesting metaphor for how we may see the healthcare industry transform over the next decade. Is that healthcare sounds an awful lot like banking. Like, I have to go to an office, I have to wait for a clinician to have time to see me instead of the other way around. Think about how that paradigm just completely flipped on its head in favor of the consumer in the banking transformation to personal financial services over 30 years. Now, if in the rare cases, Jim, that I have to go to a bank to like open a college account for my kid or something, I've got 3 or 4 bankers waiting on me instead of the other way around.
Yes.
And that's the way it should be. So, and if we're really going to personalize care experiences for people, we've got to leverage technology in a way that allows us to amplify our human capital, take out the mundanity, I don't know if I enunciated that correctly, but eliminate as much of the mundanity as we can that consumes licensed care team members' time so that they can do high value things with consumers and have a big impact. Because we can automate so much of this if we just make data liquid and data loose. And you did a great job of enunciating. Speaking of enunciation,
yeah, well, it's easy. Loose data.
It sounds like data.
Yeah.
Yep. Let your data loose.
Let me mention to any of our listeners who have just joined this episode, I'm Jim Tate. On this episode of the Tate Chronicles, I'm speaking with Damon Auer of Dedalus. Damon, one thing you mentioned there is kind of the global perspective that Dedalus brings. And I've been involved in health information technology in the U.S. for 20 years, and I have to admit a certain centric view and have not paid much attention. And I don't know if many of the healthcare leaders out there pay attention to the interoperability efforts and successes and lessons learned in other countries. I'm sure there's something the European Union is doing to go across boundaries of countries to exchange healthcare data. So that global view, there's some lessons to be learned out there, I'm sure.
Yeah, there really is. And I mean, if you think about the electronic medical record in the United States versus the electronic medical record in other parts of the world, where we have a very different funding mechanism, a very different economic model for the delivery of care services. EMRs here in the U.S., fortunately or unfortunately, I mean, we had to build them and configure them to the economic model that exists.
Correct.
And that's largely a legacy fee for service. Literally, our electronic medical record systems in the U.S. are built to bill, right?
Absolutely.
Because that's the only way that the economics work for a provider. So when you design an electronic medical record system built to bill, as opposed to built to personalized care experiences for the consumer of care, you're just going to have a different experience for the users of those systems, for the care team members, whether they're licensed or not. And that ends up making a difference. And so some of the things that are refreshing to see for me as somebody who I've spent the last 12 years of my career working every day on trying to make a dent, right? Have an impact on the healthcare industry here in the U.S. and its transformation to a consumer-centered system. It's really refreshing to see some of the stuff that we have engineered in France and in the UK, in Germany, that are truly person-centered systems.
Mm-hmm.
Now, we have no interest in being the 1004th. I think there's been a lot of consolidation over the last 5 to 6 years, but I remember back in 2011, there were literally over 1,000 EMRs in the U.S. market, right? When we were at sort of peak EMR. And we, Dedalus, have no intention right now of being another EMR vendor in the U.S. market. We've saturated and installed and we've created the digital plumbing of the EMR. Now we need to set that data loose for the benefit of populations and individuals. And the ideal cohort in healthcare is a cohort of one. And we've got now value-based economic model and some real momentum and proof of concepts that have occurred in value-based care that we know can work. Like there's sustainable economic models now that aren't fee-for-service and are real person-centered models. So what we're trying to do is Dedalus, at least in the next several years near term, to really have the biggest impact that we can with our customers, healthcare organizations here in the U.S., is help them make best use of all of that medical data that we've now digitized for the benefit of personalizing care experiences and ultimately personalizing therapies and medicines, right? For cohorts of one to have an impact on population health.
In the U.S., the HITECH Act, some 10 years ago, maybe a little longer, really stimulated providers obtaining electronic medical record systems. And so we went maybe from 20% to 80% over 5 years of adoption by providers, maybe higher than that. And so everybody got really good at gathering data, but maybe not so good at the ability to do something that data to really come up with actionable decisions based on all that data. And so hopefully we're starting to move into that phase, and we hear talks about machine learning and artificial intelligence and things like that. But the data is still so spread out and siloed. I guess that's part of my hope for TEFCA is that, that data gets loosened up, and then something can be done with it that is not only good for maybe individual care of patients, but also all that data can be used for research. We could be on about to take a real step forward. It's the whole question of the trajectory of interoperability. In the U.S., I'll just have to ask you, Damon, where do you think we are? Have we reached the halfway point? In 5 years, are we going to see a significant improvement in interoperability, or have we kind of plateaued here? I know you're an optimist, but I got to ask you.
Right. Well, I'll try and give you a thoughtful, but slightly optimistically skewed answer there, so I just can't help it. So I really do think, Jim, that TEFCA is going to help set our data loose, our healthcare data. And I remind myself and teams at Dedalus and others I get to interact with in the industry of things like just simple things like remembering that the P in HIPAA is for portability, right? I mean, and that's 30 some odd years old, right? And we get confused about the idea, and we get concerned. We scare people with the, oh my goodness, we can't share health information because what if a bad actor, right, gets access to that health information? The reality is that going back to the banking transformation of financial services metaphor we talked about earlier analogy is that we found a way to take our financial information, which is arguably as critical and sensitive information as anything that would be in our health record, and we found a way to make that consumer accessible, portable, and liquid, for lack of a better term, right? But absolutely. I, the consumer, I get to decide who gets to see my financial information and what level of my financial information I share. And I think TEFCA and the intention behind it and all the hard work that Sequoia and other associations have put in for the last 2 decades to begin to make our health information as portable and liquid and valuable and usable as our financial information. And hopefully, I don't know if we'll get here in 5 years, but I hope to, just like we've sort of begun to expunge the word patient from our lexicon in a truly person-centered healthcare system, because it's a dehumanizing term. I don't want to, I'm a person. I'm not a patient. Don't treat me like a patient and make me wait, right? For care that can have a real impact on me. So I'm getting a little far afield here. You may have to rein me back in.
No. I agree with you totally. And actually, that's a pretty good closing statement there. We're almost out of time, Damon. But before we sign off, I want to let our listeners know that if they want some more information and see the educational material, some really good blog posts, but also just to get in contact with Dedalus, the website is Dedalus. That's DEDALUS.com, Dedalus.com. Damon, it's time to say goodbye to our audience. So thanks to our audience for joining me on this episode of the Tate Chronicles. I offer a special salute to my guest today, Damon Auer of Dedalus. Damon, thanks for coming aboard today.
Jim, thank you. This has been a lot of fun. Appreciate it.
You can find more information on this show's program page at healthcarenowradio.com. That's healthcarenowradio.com. Until we meet again, here's wishing you smooth sailing and safe harbors.
Tate Chronicles transmission ending now.